Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Have you ever encountered any low-level spirits or gods /X/? Not one of the big guys, but just a spirit confined to a forest or a river, or even a particular tree.
I've got Maori, native New Zealander blood, and I went to a family gathering around Christmas when I was younger, the family being on my mother's side, where I get the Maori blood from. This gathering was way up in North New Zealand, which is mostly just Maori land and is rural. No shit, as me and my family pull into the farm, it's being held on there's a boar on a spit. Some of the uncles, adults were just called aunties and uncles, had caught earlier in the day using spears and knives. Anyway, there's a creek and stream that runs through the property, which the kids went down to and swam on most days. A lot of the time, we'd all let ourselves float down a while on inflatables or just by the current. At one point on the bank on the farm side was about 2 meters high or so, but there was a small ledge about halfway down that you could get down on from the top but not the bottom. Me and 2 other boys reckoned it would be a brilliant idea to use that ledge for eeling. We told the adults and they just shrugged and told us to knock ourselves out. So me and these 2 guys went to this ledge a bunch, using those hand casters, pick-related, and having fun chilling in this picturesque place, surrounded by rolling hills, green fields, and bushland. Us 3 boys even found a cool place further down the stream no else went to, where only we would hang. But then it got weird. A few times out swimming, all of the kids got a little anxious, and there was a couple of times we could swear we saw a figure standing on the far bank as we floated down the stream. It got to the point where me and the 2 guys were out eeling. We hadn't caught anything so far, which was weird because this stream should have been essentially untouched. And we saw a shadowy figure step out and walk towards us on the opposite bank, then begin walking across the water. Of course, we panic and book it out of there. I remember being in complete terror. We told some of the older adults and elders about this, and they seemed a little concerned, even when they dismissed it as it was probably just the farmer from the next property. But unless that farmer was from the shadow realm, I didn't buy that shit. Anyway, us boys had only been eeling during daylight hours, and we wanted to go out at night because that's the best time to catch eels. One of the older cousins, early 20s, said he'd come along, and about 6 girls begged to come along too. So 10 or so people go out at night to catch some eels, all crammed onto this tiny ledge. We're there for a few hours, the girls complaining about being bored while us boys told them to SteviaDX, worried they'll scare off the eels. That's when one of the girls gets a tug on her line. A tug that nearly pulled her off the ledge into the inky black waters beneath us. The older cousin grabs on and starts pulling the line. He's digging his feet in and struggling. Me and the other 2 boys grab on too, all trying to yank this line up, thinking we hit the jackpot. A couple minutes go by when we get some progress, slowly pulling the line in. One of the girls turned on a light, but that's all over the place because they're all screaming and freaking out. But I noticed something long and really thick being pulled out of that water, with no indication of ending. An immense eel head eventually crests the ledge. This thing was huge, slightly thicker than the one in the picture, and way longer. This thing is a meter out of the water and still looks to have most of its body in the water. But its head is only over this ledge for a couple seconds when it lets out a fucking roar, a little like a dog bark but way louder, and the line snaps as it slides back over the ledge and splashes into the water. We're stunned, and the older cousin tells us we all have to go back. So we walk back through the dark, a little disappointed, but also a little frightened. We swim in that creek, and a giant eel that fucking roars lives in it. When we got back, we told the elders our story excitedly, with them nodding and wowing, but they didn't seem surprised and actually seemed relieved, but told us we weren't to eel in the stream anymore. After that, we didn't see the shadow man again, but not long before my family left whilst out swimming, I felt something thick and slimy slide past my leg when we were near the ledge, and looking back on it, I'm convinced as to what that eel was. In Maori legends and folklore, there is a creature called the Taniwa, pronounced Tanifar, which guards certain areas in nature or is a guardian for tribes and sub-tribes, in which case it is called a Kotiaki, guardian. They generally take the form of sharks if in the sea, or an eel in fresh water. I think that the elders were concerned that the shadow man was an evil spirit or ghost and made an offering or summoned a Taniwa Kotiaki to protect us kids, and that eel was it giving us a warning, specifically that bark. Other stories I've heard about Taniwa have mentioned the roaring sound as well. I want to go back there in a couple of years and try and make an offering. Even if it isn't a Taniwa and is just an eel, that thing has to be about 80 to 100 years old to be that big, and deserves respect.
This story happened when I was around 6 years old and was my first encounter with the paranormal in 1994. My father would take me to visit my uncle in Fort Kipp on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, at their father's house, a nothing town, which he lived outside of as a child. The place just gives off feelings of hopelessness and sorrow. Even just driving past it, I felt this when I was a child. The area of his homestead had no houses around it for miles, just trees and hills. They would drink coffee and talk for hours. On this occasion, I was playing in front of my uncle's deck and ramp. He was in a wheelchair. I remember just digging in the dirt, being a kid, finding a silver dollar in the ground when I had this sudden feeling I was being watched. I ignored it for a few moments, then I looked south. Not too far off, I'd say 40 to 50 yards away, was a tree, the closest tree to the house. I could see the left side of this tree was completely vertical, right as rain, but the right side wasn't. I could see a figure peeking from around the tree. The thing is, it was the same color as the bark of the dead tree. It looked one with it never moving once. Its fingers were wrapped around the trunk, long and pointed head, egg-shaped eyes, huge and hollow. Its mouth had a smile unlike anything I've yet to see. It was staring at me. Imagine the scariest part of the scariest movie you've ever seen. I couldn't move. Complete paralysis. It must have been a whole minute. Whatever it was, it knew I was aware of it. My thought was, I wonder how fast it is. Then something snapped. I ran as fast as my legs would take me up the stairs inside. My father and his brother were at the kitchen table. I told my dad, panicked, to hurry quickly. Come outside. There's something watching me. I grabbed his hand and led him to the spot I was at and said, "Look." But when I pointed at the tree, I could see that it was a normal tree now, both sides vertical. I couldn't speak. I felt very silly for a moment, but I knew what I saw was real. All my dad said was, "Don't worry about it, don't think about it, it's okay," and led me inside. My father told me that things like that were common out here, and that it was best to ignore them. As I grew older, he told me more and more about what he saw on the land. He told me such outlandish things in such an honest way that I knew he couldn't be lying. Things he saw on the same land I saw the Goblin, the land he grew up on.
I believe that generally speaking there might be many paranormal phenomena happening all the time all around us, but we simply don't pay attention or we simply don't see or sense with our basic human senses. I myself have encountered a lot of strange things while training my peripheral vision. For some time now, probably in the last year, I've actively trained my peripheral vision, especially when running or walking through the woods. It enhances my focus, and I am able to spot many more details or small movements all around me, from small animals to bugs, plants, and so on. Among human groups, the Native Americans have the most enhanced peripheral vision. I believe it helped them with their hunts through the American wilderness. But the strangest thing, they also talk a lot about the forest spirits or the forest giants or odd stuff happening in the deep woods. Well, today I was on my way back home and I saw a tree spirit in my peripheral vision. It looked real and intricate, and I at first simply believed it was a tall guy nearby a tree, just standing there looking at nature or whatever. When I turned to see what's up, because he looked strange, very tall and weird-shaped, of course, it disappeared into the tree, so to speak. Like his body was clearly visible, but as soon as I turned, his whole body blended into the tree shape. The image still stuck with me, and I could clearly see him there, down to details. His upper body was white, more human-like, but his lower body was darker, possibly hairy. There wasn't any feeling of fear or dread. I kinda just acknowledged its presence, then went back on my way home. One more thing. Yesterday I went for a run in the woods and began whistling in hopes to summon a nature spirit. Various legends and myths across multiple worldwide cultures associate whistling in the woods and at night with spirits. Could this be the spirit just making itself known?
Using wide peripheral vision is used in exercises to draw energy up to the head. I don't know why it's easy to see things in periphery, though. This is a common thing reported with sleep paralysis experiences. Also enhanced focus and attention. You don't look at things directly if you want to spot movement or a presence. Things like catching an arrow mid-flight or seeing a rabbit duck under some bushes is intuitively easier when using the peripheral vision. When it comes to personal experience, using and concentrating on the periphery makes me hyper-aware of the things surrounding me, which would have all been unnoticed. Makes you think, what are you not seeing?
This story isn't actually my own personal experience, but is a story that I'm posting on behalf of my dad. It was a few years ago he and my uncle were driving up to a place called Lake Merrill in the mountains across the bridge, and they were having a great time. The weather was nice and everything was cool. But when they rounded this bend that leads up into some very twisty, tangly, overgrown back roads, they saw a large humanoid-type beast run across the road and into the brush. My dad jerks the car to a stop and gets out to see what it was. He's a pretty fearless hillbilly, thinking it was maybe a grizzly or something of that nature. My uncle is frozen with fear in the passenger side and refuses to leave and calls my dad back. However, my dad keeps going. He reports that the air just reeked. We're backwoods people and we're pretty avid outdoorsmen, so we know the local flora, fauna, extensive tracking skills, etc., and he said it was unlike any smell he'd ever smelled before. It was just rancid, sort of like dead fish and musty, wet dog is the best way to put it. He gets to the brush and there are no tracks, not rustled leaves, no trace of anything that big going through the way. Well, Dad's pretty stumped now and heads back to the car, shaken at this point and unnerved. They both give the same description of the thing. Tall, a definite 6 foot minimum, with shaggy overgrown hair covering its body, and it was bipedal and fast. On separate, one-on-one occasions with me, they've both disclosed that this thing was no bear. Grizzlies typically roam 10 miles more west of this location, and that they believe it to be the infamous Sasquatch of the Pacific Northwest. Klickitat and basically every other Northwest native tribe describes this same creature in their folklore, and most believe it to be a forest spirit, for the lack of evidence that our environment could support such a population that's been reported. I firmly believe this, and my brother, a park biologist here, agrees also. What does everyone else think? My dad hopes for some people's agreement that he's not a paranoid old fool that's full of shit, as he puts it.
Hey/X/Outcast here. I finally had a paranormal experience today. I've thought the paranormal was pretty stupid my whole life, but I genuinely can't explain this one. Be hiking and history enthusiast in Connecticut. On old Metacomet Indian Trail. Really cool old cave known as Tory's Den. Get all caught up in checking it out, forget that it's winter and sunset is a problem. Pretty soon, I'm jogging this trail in the pitch black trying to get out. Had to climb up rock faces to reach the cave in the first place, so pretty much fucked. Sleep in a cave versus find a way out. I start running through just straight woods. Trip once, drop cell phone with only light I have, almost didn't find it. Freaking out, a good 2 hours away from the road. This is where things started to get really weird. Start hearing this faint trilling noise like a wood flute coming from the middle of woods. Sound keeps changing direction, switching from one side to the other. Panicking, I stop dead and listen. Out of nowhere, I get this sense of calm. Start walking again slowly and find a trail. After about 30 minutes of walking this tiny little trail, trilling picks up again. Step into a little muddy stream bed, wobble a bit. When I straighten up, I'm looking at a young girl dressed in furs like 20 feet down the path. I shit you not. Panic resumes, leaving the path again like a dumbass. After a second, get shit together and find a way back to the path, calling out for the girl. Keep hearing rustling, trilling footsteps and following them. After some time of following these stop-and-go sounds, somehow pop out on the other side of the lake where I started the hike. Circle lake, get to the car, drive back and get on here as fast as possible. I couldn't make this stuff up / SteviaDX. I legitimately feel like some kind of spirit helped guide me out of those woods. I've always been a skeptic, like I said, but there is no way in hell what I was seeing and hearing was normal for an old path in the middle of the woods. Pick-related is Tory's Den. Back during the American Revolution, some British loyalists, or Tories, hid out in the den. Interesting little place. You can still find old musket balls and bits of lead in the ground near the cave.
I have a story that has creeped me out since it happened. Some nights I'll think about it and not be able to sleep. I'll set the scene. It was the summer of 2011, and I was a camp counselor at a small private college that sponsors ACT classes for high school students. At this camp, 6 other college students and I mentored, tutored, and in a sense, babysat over 50 high school students who would stay on the college campus and sleep in the college dorms for 6 weeks. It was always tough, but it was always rewarding. 2011 was my second year working at this ACT camp, and I had started a relationship with one of the other college students. We'd stay up every night after the high school students went to bed and we'd explore the campus, sneaking into the college chapel at midnight, taking walks at their small lake and forest, and spending late nights in the courtyard. I want to mention this is one of the oldest colleges in one of the oldest towns in Arkansas. They even have a cabin built in the 1800s still standing. My new girlfriend told me a story around the end of June about the small lake and forest where we'd sometimes take our late-night walks. She told me in the 1980s there was a girl who went to college who loved a boy, and he said he loved her, but he cheated on the girl. And when she confronted him, he was able to convince all his friends and most of the campus to bully her. They didn't know she was a Wiccan and regularly practiced witchcraft. The girl ran off into the woods by the lake after being bullied one evening and didn't come back until the next morning. The day she came back, she was able to convince the boy she had loved to follow her back to the woods the next night. He followed her into the woods until she disappeared in the dark, and he got lost. Then he heard growling and barking and snarling, and the noises chased him into a clearing with strange symbols out of burnt limbs on the ground, and the girl's body hanging from a tree. Then the barking and snarling chased him out of the forest. And the urban legend continues now. If a girl brings her boyfriend to the woods, and the hellhounds sense he is unfaithful, or his intentions are not pure, they'll chase him out of the forest. And this was the girl's final act of protecting other girls from unfaithful boys. Of course, we had to check it out together. She and I went out to the woods by the lake around midnight, and from the asphalt trail circling the lake, we found a dirt trail leading into the woods. We didn't have flashlights, so we used our lights on our smartphones. We climbed down a small hill into the trees, and exactly when we walked on even ground, our smartphone light started flashing. The flashlight was flashing on and off, and the home screen was also flashing on and off with no lock screen. I have no idea how it was possible. When we rushed back up on the asphalt trail, the flashing stopped, and we looked at our phones confused. I had to climb down a second time, even though she didn't want to do it again, because I needed to test that it wasn't a fluke or coincidence. When I hit even ground again, my phone flashed exactly the same as before, and then I climbed back out. She wanted to leave, and I agreed. I had never known smartphones to act that way before, and I have never been able to recreate it since. After years of watching ghost hunting shows, I was very familiar with the theory of ghosts and other spirits absorbing electricity and power from batteries for their own energy. If there is another reason, I'd love for someone to tell me why our smartphones acted so weird. The camp ended and summer did as well, and school was starting back. I went back to my state school. I was never unfaithful or anything to my girlfriend from that summer, but I discovered by Thanksgiving in 2011, after we had ended the relationship, that she had been unfaithful and her intentions had not been that pure. Now I know why she didn't want to go back a second time.
Not really spooky, but definitely paranormal. Every year in the autumn, anywhere between mid-September and early November, been taking a week off of work to go solo camping to clear my head and go off the grid. I'm a city guy and work in an office, so it's nice to get away from all the hustle and bustle and emails and phone calls. Not a super hardcore outdoorsy type, but have learned enough over the years, plus some tips from friends, family, and other campers about some basic stuff. fire buildings, safety, etc. Go camping one mid-late September. Arrive bright and early, like 7 or 8 a.m., to set up. Unfamiliar area, but supposedly often camped. Find a nice small clearing with about a slightly winding quarter-mile path to a river so I can go fishing and cook what I catch. Set up my gear, tent, fire pit, etc. without trouble. Silence my phone to officially go off the grid and put it in with my essentials in the tent. I don't carry it with me because it'll be constantly blowing up with emails and normie book shit. I always air seal all my food stuff before I go so that it doesn't attract any animals, and put all my trash, food wrappers, containers, soda cans, fish bones, etc. in a bag hung away from the camp so any bears that find their way around either don't mess with it or do it away from my camp. I like bears, but I don't need a close encounter with a hungry and territorial one. Have a great time, get some fresh air, eat some good fire-cooked meals, and generally get away from it all. All in all, a great week, but starting to get ready to get back into the grind. Skip ahead to Thursday, early afternoon, second to last full day before I leave. On my way back to the camp from the river, had caught a pretty nice salmon and had it strung up and in a bucket with some water to bring it to camp. Hear clattering and rustling up ahead. Immediately think, fuck, a bear brought down the bag and is rummaging through it. Very slowly continue down the path, keeping my eyes and ears about me. I'm slowly making my way down the path toward the bend. From the bend, it's a straight shot to camp with the bear bag halfway between the bend and camp. Hear this constant clop sound, which I figure is the bear chewing at one of the disposable liquid containers I had some soup in. Hoping that this damn bear isn't on the path so I can just get to camp and wait for him to finish rummaging through. Turn the corner, prepared for the worst. Sure enough, right in the middle of the path, I see trash strewn about, and I'm staring at the backside of a grizzly bear. I didn't even know grizzlies were in this area. I was just worried about black or brown bears. I freeze and back up a bit behind a tree, still watching in the hopes of this thing having his fill of fish bones and going back to wherever he came from. It's far enough away that all I really see is bear butt, but it's still kind of neat seeing a bear for real. It's then I start noticing things. This bear's fur is very reddish, almost an orangey fox color or an Irish setter, that auburn kind of color, and that weird clopping sound still hasn't stopped. And that's when I drop the bucket. Water splashes everywhere, and this goddamn fish on a string starts thrashing around in the bucket making a racket. It immediately stops, stands up straight as bears do to get a good view, and looks straight up into the sky. My eyes go wide, and I just about piss myself. This isn't a fucking bear, this isn't a fucking bear at all. Where you'd normally find a bear neck and head is, well, a bird head, like a fucking crow's head. Long black beak, beady black eyes, sleek feathers. In one motion it turns its head to the side, gets down on all fours and turns to face me head on. Get an even better look at this thing. Aside from the bird head, this thing mostly looks like a reddish grizzly until you get to the paws. It had hands, like the stumpy but thumbed hands you'd find on an otter or raccoon, but with the grasping fingernails of a bird. It's looking at me, its head doing the twitchy, blinky movements that you'd expect from a bird, and clapping its beak. That clopping, it was this thing's beak. It slowly walks closer, almost cautiously. I'm paralyzed. This thing's maybe like 20 steps away from me. I come to my senses thinking, do I run and have it chase and kill me, or try to use my knife to fight the thing and have it kill me? This fish continues flopping around. The creature looks at it, then looks at me, opens its beak and lets out a short break, like the combination of a dog bark and a light bird caw. I figure that this thing is hungry. I'll throw it the fish and book while it's eating it. I reach down slowly, grab the fish, and hurl it with the intent of going over it and into the woods so I can book back down the path once it turns around. This thing bolts up on its hind legs, catches it with its beak, and continues staring at me, almost cautiously. Shit. If I run now, it's gonna chase. That fish was my only hope. It sits down, but still upright, using its hand paws to hold the fish while its beak stripped the bones of meat, the whole time still looking at me with those tiny black eyes. Picks the fish clean, puts the carcass down, still staring at me, makes another bark or caw and fucking bolts into the woods. Hear loud cracking and snapping. This thing is probably knocking down saplings and breaking branches with that kind of bulk and speed. I ran back down the path towards the river. Sit on the riverbank, freaking the hell out. Realize the sun will be setting soon and I'm going to have to spend the night. I haven't even collected any wood for a fire. I'm going to be in the woods, alone, in the dark, with some monster roaming around and no way to get to my truck. Hustle back to camp. Hopefully I can just pick up some various twigs and dead branches from around the immediate area. Edge of the path just opening into the clearing and camp. There is a neatly stacked pile of branches, some of them from pretty big trees, some of them saplings themselves. I'm in full nope mode, but I'm not about to ignore all this free firewood during crunch time. Start the fire. Sit in my tent, clutching my knife, guzzling soda, and scarfing trail mix to stay awake. Twitching at every rustle and chatter and owl hoot. At some point I pass out sitting up. Morning the next day, flies buzzing around me wakes me up with a jolt, damn near stabbed the air. Fire's mostly out, just some cinders. I spilled my soda while sleeping and that's why the flies were buzzing around. Remember everything that happened. I'm getting out of here now, cutting this vacation short. Immediately douse what's left of the fire, pack everything up to head back to the truck. As I make it to the parking lot after a long hike, I hear a long, loud bark caw, as well as a bunch of normal, happy forest sounds like birds and stuff. Somehow, even hearing that creature, I'm suddenly at ease. As I'm driving home, start to think about how things went down, how cautious that thing was, the way it ran after it ate, and the firewood. It repaid me for the fish that I gave it. I don't know what it was, some intelligent chimera creature or a forest spirit, but whatever it was a crazy experience.
Be me, 16 years old, little shit, loved to piss my parents off by doing dangerous stuff. One time, me and a friend decided it would be funny to steal a skull from the cemetery. We actually dug up a grave and took the skull with us. It was full of maggots, disgusting. We thought that we would most probably get a disease of some kind because of it, so we took it home and boiled it in hot water. Actual pieces of skin fall down of it, disgusting. Skull is now squeaky clean, so we decide to melt a candle and place on top of it. We leave it in the garage. Both me and my friend have very similar nightmares of our bodies rotting for the next couple of weeks. Strange sounds also coming from the garage every night, like something prancing about, kind of like an excited dog. My parents are also able to hear it, but every time they checked, the sounds would stop. Dad thinks it's a raccoon, calls exterminator. They don't find shit, but the sounds continue for a couple more days. One day my dad was pissed because he had an important meeting early in the morning and the sounds would keep him awake. Decides to go down with a bat in hopes of finding the source of the noises. Decide to join him because keck, the sound stops as usual. My dad's face is red because of how pissed he is. Out of fucking nowhere, something invisible violently takes the bat from my dad's hands and throws it at the garage door. My dad is a turbo manlet and does weightlifting. I can't imagine the strength of that thing that was able to take the bat from his hands so easily. Chairs start to move by themselves, and the door slams shut. Can hear my mom on the other side trying desperately to open. Out of nowhere, something throws the skull and lands in the roof of the car. Everything stops. There's just silence and my mom screaming and crying at the other side. What the fuck is this? My dad's voice cracks. I'm ice cold, petrified. My dad keeps asking what the hell was that and why was there a skull in the garage? Can't answer, I'm petrified. My dad beats me a couple of times, but I still don't react. He and my mom hug me. We all start crying. We move to my aunt's for a couple of days. We are all Hispanic and my mom believes in shaman voodoo stuff. She gets an old lady from the neighborhood that knows how to do a limpia, which is a Mexican ritual to make evil spirits or curses go away. Says that me and my friend must be present because we were the ones that disturbed the spirit by bringing the skull. She gets holy water, incense, and some plants. She rubs the plants on the four of us and starts chanting some shit in Spanish. She brings the skull and places it in the middle. Continues with the chant for almost an hour. I'm just looking at my friend, trying to hold the laughter, when the skull suddenly cracks open like an egg. Smoke comes out of it. Smells like rotten meat. The old lady tells us to ask for apologies for disturbing the spirit's rest, and we do. My voice cracks. I'm scared as hell. The smoke starts to gather in one corner and takes the form of a sphere. stays there for a couple of seconds, then dissipates into the ventilation ducts. The old lady says it's done, that as penance both me and my friend can't eat meat for a month, or else the spirit will return. I fucking obeyed. Can't think of an experience as scary as this one.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.